Greetings all, thedvsmonkey here. Today I want to talk about my Sony a7 III setup. I've already been through the a6600 and the three lenses that I have with that, and that is what I'm filming on, and also the camera that I use strictly for filming. I don't take any still pictures on it. Again, I think I took one just to test it to see how it worked, and that was it. But what I'm going to talk about today is my trusty a7 III. This camera is like the most amazing camera I've ever had. Despite the fact that I've had so many of them, this was my go-to as far as still pictures go. And again, sometimes for filming as well, but that's only when I can't use the a6600, like if I'm filming something about the a6600. But for the most part, this is my still camera. It has been for a while now. When I decided to get back into photography, at the time I had a Canon 6D, and it was old, the battery life sucked, and I started to think that perhaps it was time to upgrade, and that's when I decided to step into the Sony system, and I bought a Sony a7R II. A wonderful camera, but with enough negatives for me that I didn't keep it. And I sold it, but I ended up not getting paid for it. I took it back, and that's when I invested into all the lenses and everything. But again, the shortcomings of the camera were enough to make me decide that at the time that I would get rid of that camera, plus I think two of my Panasonic cameras, and then I ended up buying this a7 III, and I do not regret it one bit. This camera's amazing. I'm not gonna go over specs and all that kind of shit. This camera's been out long enough. You should know everything you need to know about it. Again, here we have my Peak Design Arca plate on there. I also have the little Peak Design. You see these on a lot of videos, you see them hanging there. And it's for the strap system. It allows you to just sort of switch in between all of the different strap systems that Peak Design makes. Makes it very convenient. So I have these on a lot of things too. The one thing that I did was I changed out the eyepiece for a bigger one, because I got a big nose and I was smushing up against the screen and smudging it all the time. So this makes it a little bit bigger so that I can keep it away. And yes, I do use that more than I use the screen for still shots. All right. It had always been my goal since I became a photographer, when I finally started to learn what I was doing, that I wanted to possess the Trifecta lenses. The Trifecta lenses being the 16-35, the 24-70, and the 70-200, which a lot of people will tell you, if you have those three lenses and maybe one more prime, you've got all that you could possibly need, unless you're a sports or wildlife shooter, in which case you need something like the 100-300, or you need to spend $50,000 on a 600 millimeter, f2.8 lens. I don't. But I was very excited when I completed this out. Now, for my use, I decided that I was not going to invest the crazy stupid money into G Master lenses to get the 2.8. Modern cameras these days, and for what I shoot, f4 was plenty. So I started, and this is in no particular order when I got these things, but here's the 16-35 and f4. It is a fantastic lens. And I say pretty much after I get any lens that it's like my go-to lens. But once I got this 16-35, when I was walking around, this is before I got the a6600, when I was using the a7 III for hybrid purposes, meaning stills and video, this is the lens that I put on there. It's a fantastic lens. It gave me more than wide enough field of view, gave me a little bit of zoom, and anything else that was further away from that, I didn't need to do at the time. Now the middle guy, the 24-70, most photographers, videographers, whatever, will tell you, if you only had to get one lens, the 24-70 is that lens. It is the most versatile zoom lens that gives you wonderful range between that 24 and that 70, so that you're wide enough but you can reach a little bit further away. And they're right. It is an amazing lens. When I had my Canon stuff, I only had 3 lenses. I had a 24-70, a 70-200 f2.8 at the time, and I had a 50mm prime. But I expanded more when I got the Sony stuff. So speaking of the 70-200, here's my 70-200 f4. This one has all the stuff on it. All the steady shot, optical steady shot, which for photography, their optical steady shot stuff works really well. It sucks for video, but it does work really well for still shots. Now, when I had my Canon stuff, I didn't have the IS version of that lens, the image stabilization version, because it was just so much bigger and so much more expensive. And I got pretty adept at being able to get my shots perfectly by standing and holding the camera correctly and all that kind of stuff. But for this one, you know, it came with it and I went with it. Then I moved into my prime lenses. This was actually the first lens I bought with the camera, and that's the 85 1.8 prime lens. This thing is unfreaking believable. It's really hard to take a bad shot with this lens. When you're shooting human beings, models, this is it. This is the one. And I remember when I shot this one girl, the first time we shot, I didn't even have the Sony stuff. I was shooting on my Panasonic. And then the second time we shot, I said, you know, well, I got a new camera and I just got this new lens. I want to see what it can do. And we were just like, unbelievable. I keep saying that word. It was unbelievable how amazing the shots were. So this 85 1.8, and it's not even that expensive in the grand scheme of how expensive Sony lenses are, but do yourself a favor and get this. It's even great as a walk around, like street photography lens. You can be far enough away from people. It's unobtrusive. You know, it's not like this, but it's a wonderful lens. After that, I knew I wanted to get into macro stuff, and I had never had a macro lens when I was with my Canon stuff. So I bought the 90mm 2.8 macro lens. And let me tell you, should I say it? Unbelievable. I took this to the botanical gardens, and I got a picture of one of those itty bitty teeny weeny ants that's like smaller than like if you clipped your pinky nail, it's like smaller than that. And it was like 50s horror movie, like how big it zoomed in and got into this ant. And I mean, you could see the ant plus what it was crawling on was like a flower or something. It's on my website, check it out. Holy crap. And then I got the inside of flowers with all of the pollen on you know, the little bristles and the stamens, and go back to my like grade school science classes. But I was astounded at how amazing this lens was for macro shots. Now, a lot of people do use this for like model shots because, you know, it's just 5mm more than the 85, and you can go to 2.8 on this. So the one thing that I find if you're trying to do stuff like that, though, is that it tends to hunt a lot more than the 85. I don't know why, it just does, but I usually use this for macro stuff. So again, if I go to like the botanical gardens and I want to get close in on shit, this is the way to go. Unbelievable. The last lens that I got to complete the lenses that I'm ever going to get for this camera, I had to wait a while because they had talked about it coming out and everyone was like, ooh, and then it came out and you couldn't find it anywhere. It was impossible to get. So it was a long time after its release before I was able to get a copy of this, but that is the 35 1.8. And a lot of the reviews that I watch where people are like, do you even need to bother spending money on the 35 1.4? And across the board, everyone was like, no, because even though it's less expensive, it's just as amazing as their 1.4, which I think is a G Master. Yep, it is. It's a pretty amazing lens. And once I got it, unless I'm doing something specific, it now sits on the camera. It's the go-to lens. It's what's on there all the time. You can get amazing pictures with it. I haven't done a model shoot with it yet, but I'm anxious to try it out. So as soon as all this freaking COVID-19 shit wears down and I can start working with models again comfortably, then I think I'm gonna really be excited to try this out. And that's all I got for this camera. Now, naturally, I can use any of these on the a6600 because they're full frame lenses. I can use the lenses that I have for the a6600 on the a7 III, but I have to put it in APC mode. So, you know, there's no need for me to use those lenses on here because I've covered every range with these. You know, so I don't need to do that. Again, I can't put these on the a6600. So if I wanted to, you know, do some really far off shots for some reason, like if I went to a regatta or you know, I don't know. I guess the rage is if I wanted to use this to get pictures of like protests and stuff and be far enough away that I don't get my ass kicked or shot in the head with a rubber bullet or something like that, I would take that lens. But the bottom line is that these are all my full frame lenses that I use for my a7 III. Any one of these lenses, in fact, I've used every one of them to film on the a7 III, and they all work fantastically for that too. When I did have my Canon gear, this was my go-to lens. I had my Canon 6D, or at the time, you know, as I progressed through, I started with a 20D, then I got a 40D. This was my go-to lens. I used to carry that camera with a grip with my 70-200 f2.8, so it was even bigger than this, and that was my go-to lens. That's where I carried it around everywhere I went, and people were like, Jesus, dude, that thing's huge. You know, how can you carry that? Well, you know, you just get used to it. And pretty soon that got to be, you know, like how I stood, how I moved, how I got my shots and everything. It was based on the weight and the size of that camera. So when I switched to Sony, you know, especially with the a7R2, because it was smaller, it didn't have the bigger grip because it didn't have the bigger battery, which was one of the things I hated about it. The battery life sucked. I had like 40 batteries with me all the time, but it was difficult to use the camera because it was so much smaller and so much lighter that I wasn't used to it. And I had a lot of wandering, you know, blurry shots because I wasn't used to how light it was. I do have the grip for this camera, and sometimes I put it on, but I got an aftermarket grip that was like $50 because I didn't want to spend another $400 on the grip at the time. Eventually, I probably won't even get the Sony grip for this because at some point I will replace this camera. Maybe if they ever come out, the a7 IV, we'll see what happens with it. I had toyed with the idea of getting an a7R4, but I did not want, what is it, like 90 megapixels or at least 60 or something like that. I mean, a stupid amount. And I'm already using up a shit ton of my hard drive space, you know, filming every day. So much so that I've bought several hard drives over the past year, you know, because I keep filling them up. Currently, I have a 10 terabyte drive, in addition to another 8 terabyte drive, in addition to several other smaller drives that are hooked up to my iMac. So I've got a shit ton of hard drives. Plus, I have an entire drawer filled with ones that are filled. So you have to think about that kind of stuff. And 24 megapixel was plenty for me, you know, for what I do. I keep saying that, but that's just it for what I do. This is the stuff that works for me, the way that I shooting the things that I want to shoot. Might not work for you. You might want something else. Or you might have gear acquisition syndrome like I do, and you want the latest and greatest, and you've already got an a7 III or R3 and an a7R4 and an A9 and an A9 II and blah, 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 and all that kind of crap. But not me. I'm very happy with this. And because I've moved so much primarily to video with the a6600, I haven't been using this as much. Shame on me. But it is there. I do take it with me. Sometimes I just don't use it. I just end up carrying it. Okay, that's it. That's all I wanted to talk about. I know I told you I was going to go through my a7 III setup and the other lenses that I have. So there you go. Now you know what I got. The only other cameras that I have are the Sony X3000 action cam. And again, that's what sits inside my vehicle. That's the only time I use it now. And then I have my GoPro for when it's rainy, shitty, or I don't want to carry, you know, a big setup. And that's all I got. That's all I've got, as if that isn't enough. Too much is never enough, though. All right, I'm still looking into the Sigma 16mm f1.4 for the a6600. I keep hovering over the buy now button. I've been looking around. Sometimes I find sales on it. I'm in no hurry to get it, but that's probably what's coming next. I still haven't got my grid, which pisses me off for the light. I paid to have it delivered yesterday, and it didn't even ship until yesterday. So I'm probably not getting it till tomorrow. I mean, it doesn't matter because everything looks great. So I'm anxious to see what happens when I, you know, get this stupid grid. I'll let you know. So if you have any questions or comments, share. I love it. I love all the questions that I've been getting. It's pretty cool. So that's it. That's all I got for you. Thanks for joining me. Like, subscribe, and all that shit. And remember, kids, forward and up.